Caitlin. It's lovely to see everyone this morning. Welcome. So yeah, as Caitlin said, my name is Leah McDowell and I'm the art director at the Edinburgh-based publishing house Florist Books. And I am here to extend a particularly warm welcome to our guest speaker, Ian Morrison from the Fruit Market Gallery. So as Caitlin said, we're officially in festival month and in-person events are becoming possible again, hooray. So we wanted to think about what the future holds for events in physical art spaces. So that's why Ian is the perfect man to be here today. He is going to be chatting to us about the Fruit Market's changing relationship with space over the past 2 years. Because as many of you will know, the gallery's just recently undergone a multi-million-pound renovation and expansion into what was the Electric Circus Club next door to it on Market Street. So not only did the Fruit Market team need to navigate the challenge of relocation, but like so many other museums and galleries, they also needed to maintain their relationship with the public when the pandemic was keeping them apart. So Ian is the perfect person to walk us through this topic, and he's the partnerships curator for the Fruit Market, where he leads on cross-art form collaborations and events. He's also a published poet, and his poetry collection, I'm a Pretty Circular, which is published by Vagabond Voices, was shortlisted for the 2019 Saltire Society's Poetry Book of the Year Award. And he's also a previous winner of the Creative Edinburgh Creativity Award, which is that's a good bio, it's a good intro. So welcome, Ian. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, it's really nice to be with you all. I surprised myself by pressing the energize button in the poll because I'm like, it's like people's energy is making me feel like way more alive and awake than I normally would feel at this time in the morning. So thank you for that, everyone.
We're sending you energizing vibes across Zoom. Well, yeah, it's brilliant to have you here. So you're going to talk us through what the past 2 years have looked like. So over to you.
Yeah, cool. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. So we can do this. So it's moving windows around, the classic thing. Slideshow. So yeah, I couldn't resist the pun when I saw that the theme for today was space. I was like, look at this glowing sun and moon that Creative Edinburgh have put behind me for the logo. And I suppose what I'm hoping I'll do this morning is give you a bit of a sense of our trajectory, our journey through, as Leah was saying, the past 2 years. What I was thinking about when I got the invitation to talk about space was what actually does space do to the identity of an organization and to its program when it's in flux, I guess. We were at the Fruit Market Gallery in maybe a relatively fortunate position a couple of years ago because we were already thinking about how to move both out of and then back into our physical building that we've been in one form or another since 1974. So when the pandemic hit, we were already in the middle of this this complicated transition, I guess. So maybe I'll just give a few facts about Fruit Market for anyone who doesn't know. I'm recognizing quite a lot of familiar faces in the chat, so I won't labor the point. But yeah, Fruit Market Gallery exists on Market Street in Edinburgh, right next to the station, in buildings that were initially built as fruit and veg warehouses, which was where the name comes from. We kind of hover over the station on stilts. This is one of the fun things to realize about Fruit Market is that we don't actually exist on the ground. If you come up the steps from the station onto Market Street and look to the right, you can see that we're basically on the same kind of girders that the Fourth Rail Bridge was made from. And actually it was the same engineers that were doing it. So that's kind of intriguing, like to think about in terms of like a history point of view. So in a way, what's happened now with the Fruit Market's refurbishment is joining it all back together again, because in the 70s, the Fruit Market closed down. I think it moved out to the outskirts of Edinburgh, and one half of it, the half closest to the station steps, became a visual arts space, initially run directly by what was then the Scottish Arts Council and is now Creative Scotland. And then next door, well, where I'm sitting now, was a much loved nightclub and music space for different generations um, of Edinburgh revellers, I guess. So depending on who you talk to, you'll hear chat about Buster Brown's, or for me it was Club Mercado, then it was Massa, and latterly Electric Circus. So yeah, we've sort of like brought the whole space back together, and we're hoping to keep some of the energy and connections that the space has as a venue for live as well. But we'll come back to that when I come on. Anyway, I'll start by thinking about where we were. And I was having fun looking back through the archive at some photographs of how things used to be. I don't know about everyone else, but I think the thing that's just most striking for me about these pictures is so many people in one space, all close together. So yeah, you'll hopefully recognize a few faces from some of these events. Yeah, there's the Damian Ortega exhibition. I think that was one of our Fresh Fruit gatherings. That one looks just insane. And to me, that was the Martin Creed private view from 12 years ago, I think, probably now. Not much social distancing happening there. And then, yeah, Mark Mullinger getting ready for the artist talk at the start. So I think it was clear basically that for us, we were outgrowing the spaces we had. You can see us pushing at the edges of them already. And then this is, I found a Creative Edinburgh event. This was the CC Love event from, I think, 2018 or something. So we're looking forward to having all of you back in the physical space again, because that was one of our favorite regular collaborations was hosting Creative Edinburgh. Turning the gallery pink and red, very nice. So yeah, so that's where we were. What I've done is I've picked maybe a couple of threads. This is very much like my personal programming journey through the last couple of years. My colleagues have been doing loads of other interesting stuff too, and I was like, I can't quite represent everything that's been happening, but there's a couple of regular characters that will pop up through the rest of the slides. One is this woman here, Helen Douglas, who I don't know how many of you know her. She's a wonderful artist, bookmaker, and teacher. Lives down on the Borders and has been kind of a leading voice in Scottish artist-led publishing since the 70s. She runs a press called Reproduction. So this is her at Artist Book Market, which is a regular event that we used to do. We also do a regular design event, which we've partnered with Creative Edinburgh in the past, and I recognise Anne-Marie amongst the attendees as people that have been part of that. So there's Helen in her physical element. And in 2019, we did an exhibition as part of the Artist Book Market, showing a selection of her work that kind of opens out. She's good on concertina books and scrolls. So we were like, right, let's think about that physically. So yeah, just showing you that. Very beautiful work. And then, right, where's the slides going to go next? So I'm riding the slides like a roller coaster here. Oh yes, so just before we shut the doors to the public, so we finally closed this building here for refurbishment in August 2019. In the run up to that, there was a sort of funny period where we weren't quite sure when the builders were going to be ready to start and when the money was going to be in place. So we programmed it more or less tentatively for the last bit. And it turned out there was a period of probably about 4 to 6 months where we had unexpected flexibility. As in, that's another thing, we had nothing booked in. But it was a really good practice for what was going to happen next, because we were thinking, okay, well, what can we do in a light touch way? So one of the first things we did was we said yes to a project from artist Ryan Gander, working with the writer Jonathan P. Watts. And you can see in the top right of the picture here that the stairs, the old Richard Murphy stairs, are elevated. They used to come up and down like a drawbridge, because we'd already started work on the upstairs gallery. But we brought in this kind of like quite a publishy actually exhibition where artists had selected texts that were important to them and annotated them, and then they were on like basically the insides of ring binders attached to the walls that people could come and take away those and make their own publications. So again, it was quite a light touch thing, but actually, you know, someone who's a poet and loves the literary side of what Edinburgh is, it was a bit of a joyful thing to bring in. And we did a little program of book launches. during that. So that was like maybe one sort of step towards working in a different way and thinking about what happens if you reduce half the space. Then I couldn't resist showing these pictures up. So again, you can see the stairs up in the background. So this is from this period. And I started working with like 4 other poets, Callie Gardner on the left, Tom Powell with his mouth agape, and also Jane Goldman and Jeanette Ayachi, to basically, because we were going to shut, and I thought, well, why not get some writers in residence to look at what the fruit market has been and what it might be with reference to our archive and our history during that time. So this was us having a meeting to start the ball rolling for that. At that period, just before the building closed, you can see on the wall behind that the iconic fruit market poster wall had already disappeared and was being filled up with messaging about us in our opening out refurbishment program. So where have I gone next with this? Oh yes, right. So then we scooted over and we managed to blag a space at the Waverley Mall, which I was really delighted about because I was thinking I really want a physical space, even if it's somewhere that's different. And my colleague Ali, who runs the bookshop here, was very keen that we kept a bookshop space going. So even though we were closing the galleries, we had this really nicely designed space. Actually, it was the Custom Lane guys had worked with them all to create like a shop come event space with cafe seating for what was then William and Johnson's down the side. So this is the writer's shift crew sitting around the table that I'm sitting at now. Here I am at the same table. The table moves, anchoring me. In the cafe space, like plotting and planning and talking about what we're going to do. I just noticed on the table there's a book called Art Oracles, which feels very appropriate for the kind of predictive nature of what we were trying to do. Jane's very on brand, holding up our in-between program. This is just that space. So I think my approach as a programmer was very much like, I'm going to use any space that I've got to do something interesting and to think about how to keep the relationships going with our various communities. So we started to program. I worked with Pip Thornton, who's the artist on the left there. I think she's now one of the Chancellor's Fellows at the university and was part of the informatics team at Edinburgh University when we started. She made this installation called Arcadia, which fascinatingly looks at the way that Google prices individual words for advertisers if they want to get the hits from search engines. And then she put through Walter Benjamin's Arcades project, scrolling through it with all the words priced. And it was one of those things where I was really excited to see that if you bring, creatives into a space, whatever the context is, they will find a really interesting way to read that space. And I was maybe anxious at the start of moving to the mall that we would end up being somehow kind of, hidden and subsumed by the mall context. But this was just a great example for me of how an artist can come into the space and think, well, where are you? What would be interesting to, tackle and think about? And I suppose this piece was scrolling for months with a really, intriguing take on how capitalist consumerist forces might be interweaving with creativity, and how spaces might work with or resist that. So also we were literally resisting that because we probably weren't meant to be drinking wine down in the male concourse, but we had a little sneaky private view down there. Bless them, the security guards were very forgiving. Anyway, it was really fun to work in that context. So we worked with Pip, and then we started kind of thinking. Basically, we had a good 6 months in here before the pandemic hit. So there was time to kind of do a bit of stuff. And you can see this is classic to what I think of as the fruit market approach of how do you just fit things around other things and make them all work together. So here we are doing a film screening in a bookshop space. We worked with HIV Scotland and Edinburgh Artists Moving Image Festival to do a World AIDS Day event fundraiser, and we had the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence there doing fundraising. I couldn't resist showing Chris Scott's pictures because there's so many amazing pictures from this. Love it. That's such a good picture. Just like, I mean, wow. Okay. And I'm just kind of enjoying seeing what this is the thing. At the time, this felt really revolutionary for us. We're going to do a live Skype during the event. How's that going to work? Oh, we'll try it once maybe. And see, little did we know that 3 months later, this was going to feel like old school. You know, people in a room watching the live Skype. Yes, we had John Grayson, a great Canadian filmmaker who made loads of activist films like around the AIDS crisis in the 90s that are very fun, like musicals with singing bums and things. So anyway, so he's great. So we did that. Yes, so there you go. So that was a little step into digital. And then this is, I find like this is the last physical event that we did. And of course, there's Helen Douglas popping up again in the corner. I told you to be repeating characters. So Helen did this, I think I can never remember if it's called a lab or a studio, but it was a creative informatics event looking at, in this case, publishing and digital. And so Helen was talking about her experience of working with digital apps. Like she made a book scroll. You know, I showed you her scrolls earlier, and she worked with the Tate to create an app for, that had a long, very beautiful scroll on it. That was rejected by the Apple Store for not being complicated enough, which was, so she had an interesting story to tell around, you know, who controls what in terms of digital publishing. And you know, like she's been doing this for a long time, but she's always been reinventing herself. So yeah, it was just this was literally the 10th of March though. So that, thinking about the chronology, it's just wild. We were all like, is everything about to change? And of course it was. But yeah, there's Helen in the space. And then what happens? Oh yeah, Greg's closed. Yeah. Sorry, I was looking back through my pictures. I was like, I think I might just put this in. I was, yeah, that was one of the happiest things about being in the mall was I was only 60 steps from my desk to the Greg's. Yeah, this was the closing day for Greg's. Annoyingly, I discovered that the day after this, when I hadn't gone in anymore, like anyone who was working in the mall could eat in Greg's for free because they had so much food left over, but I missed that. Not that I'm still bitter about that now. Anyway, that's Greg's. So here's Jane. So Jane was one of the poets that you saw earlier from the Writer's Shift. One of the things that we could do was we could get the boxes of the archive out and start looking at how we'd got to the point Fruit Market was at. And again, this is one of the things that was really useful to do at a time of organizational change, because we, you know, like anyone working in the arts, we were always, you know, going from project to project, and there was always enough work to consume your attention in the present with whatever was happening. So having a bit of time, especially where like other creatives came in and did some of that investigative work with us, was really helpful, especially because, you know, I mentioned the Fruit Market has existed on the site since 1974. We knew a lot about the programme from the noughties onwards. Our current director, Fiona Bradley, has been with us, I think, 17 or so years now. So that organisational memory is very present and very fresh. But Jane, in particular, was sort of delving back into early exhibitions. She'd been a student in Edinburgh during the 80s. So here she's looking at John Chamberlain's works. And I didn't know John Chamberlain had shown it at Fruit Market. I knew he'd shown it in Inverleith House a few years back. So anyway, this kind of activity was happening. My colleague, Dr. Ruth Bretherick, had also, in a stroke of like happy, you know, serendipity, just digitized the archive. So we now, for the first time, had a list of all the exhibitions with in some cases, images. So the archive became a space, I guess, that we could go to for content and for, you know, an interesting deep dive into what you know shaped the organization that we were all working in. So it felt very valuable. Probably made us more excited about some of the things and more aware of how some audiences come to us, you know, audiences that knew the organization in the past. And I just lovely photographs were kind of popping up. So that was in the previous slide, that little image here from the Liz Ogilvie and Robert Callender exhibition in, I think it was 1980. Amazing to see what the building was like then. So this was like way back before the 90s renovation, looking much more probably like it would have done when the Fruit Market closed its doors. And it was, you know, in terms of like trying to be aware of how different, for want of a better word, generations of audience see you. We'd just done maybe a couple of years ago a book launch with Elizabeth Ogilvie, who'd approached us saying, oh yes, you know, would Fruit Market do this? And it was one of those things where luckily there was someone in the organization who was like, oh yeah, Elizabeth Ogilvy showed with us, and it'd be nice to do that. But I feel much more aware of who the earlier artists in the program were now, and hopefully there's more of a connection that might mean some of those voices are being given space to still be part of the program now going forward. Also, it was like fun to see for inspiration, because we've just taken the cafe in house. We're now running the cafe directly, in a bit of a kind of like mixed move of thinking, well, we want more like joined upness between like all the front of house experience, but also hopefully if we can do it well, it's a valuable revenue stream into the building. But here, if you see the tiny small print there on the door of the Fruit Market, coffee house and salad bar. I was like, great. So back in the 80s, we were already innovating in terms of radical Edinburgh cuisine. Or I can imagine salad bars, maybe they were all the rage, I'm not sure. I was too young. So yes, so archive, and then things like this, people have talked about before. It's just worth like taking a minute to be like the Fruit Market literally had like the first European exhibition for Jean-Michel Basquiat, in 1984. There was a really visionary director at the time called Mark Francis, who was programming like loads of people that then have turned out to be mainstays of contemporary arts. And John Cage just casually upstairs. There was a John Cage exhibition while Basquiat was downstairs. Like finding all these kind of photographs has been, a joy in itself, and just to think of the importance of all this as we think about our program going forwards. So yeah, and I'd share a couple of bits of the writing because I couldn't resist. This is Tom Pow, a bit of his poem thinking about space for us, where we can still breathe unmasked. Space has innocence, anonymity. We cup it and let it go like a fly we failed to capture. We trap it best by building around it, turning space into place as here. Though any enclosed space carries history, its own or one memory or imagination may give it. This building is hollowed out like the hold of a ship. Absence broods in its corners. So yeah, I just loved that from Tom Pow, helping us to think through what we were actually doing and what it might mean, and the space we're creating. And Jane, who's like typically fearless, and where she went when we were in the mall, she did all this research about where the mall's money was coming from and how the land for the mall had actually used to be the Fruit Market before the site we're on now was the Fruit Market, and how the council had basically, I think, sold it off at some point, and the money that should have probably gone into the common good fund for the council had gone elsewhere. But yeah, again, so she's talking about how the company that owns them all, I think, have got business interests in Africa, and she's saying Namibia's expropriated wealth. I want to ask, should it underpin our common good funded common land? I ask in a poem made for the Fruit Market Gallery, made crossing the first and between the third and second sites of local fruit markets, built on common land, fruit markets rebuilt as the Fruit Market Gallery and the Fruit Market Pop-Up. It's the 20th of November 2019. I want to acknowledge we stand here on common land, funded by common good funds. Here now there is art, here now is poetry, here too there was fruit. So yeah, just getting writing like that has helped so much for me in terms of thinking about what people know from the space, what they want from the space, what they hope for from the space, and what politically we might be able to do that's useful and transformative in the city. So anyway, I couldn't resist sharing a bit of poetry, being a poet as well as a programmer. So right, where am I off to now? Okay. Yes, I just thought I'd mention we did have a bit of help from there's an organisation called The Space, which some of you will know. I think they're based in Birmingham. I'm a bit confused about where they are because where is anyone anymore? But they were doing a program with Creative Edinburgh, providing digital. I would call it digital confidence training, to be honest, like with organisations, and we were one of the first lot to do it. I know they've done a second round, but if anyone is looking for a space to kind of work through over a series of mentoring sessions, how they might want to change their relationship with digital and be a bit more experimental, open a few new doors, I'd look out for repeats of that program. I think it might come for a third round, but we worked with a great glass artist and digital mentor Sharon Ruth, based out in East Lothian. She helped us. Rob was down in Birmingham, and my colleagues Elizabeth and Louise we're all working together to think about, right, how do we tackle what we want to do going forward? Because by this point in the pandemic, I think, right, we know that we want to retain some of the access benefits of doing things online, both for people who find it challenging to come into a physical space, even if they're nearby, but also for dispersed geographical audiences who might be wonderful to connect with. So they helped us get a bit braver about that, and basically were saying, just try things, practice them a lot before you do it, ideally, and then after you've done them, take time to review and learn from it. So like, it was very simple what I took from it, but it's helped us, and then give us the confidence to say yes to Helen Douglas, who's back. So Helen, during the pandemic, was basically down at a converted mill in the Borders, where she's lived since the 70s, and she made this beautiful book called Setting, which is loads of photographs of the skies around where she was living, and you get a real sense from the book of a passage through time. She was kind of looking at lunar cycles, natural cycles, also disruptions from like local airbase and military jets and things flying across, and it sort of reads like a big scroll, but it's a huge book. And normally we'd have been like, we need to do this in a physical space. How can we launch such a thick book of beautiful photographs and perfectly chosen paper and nice binding online? But we did it, and we were like, go on, Helen, let's have a shot. And she was typically up for it, and we approached it as a kind of behind the scenes look at her constructing the book, and did a couple of series of flows through like image sequences. And so that's now up on YouTube. So if you're curious to see that, do feel free to Google it. I think it's in the Fruit Market's YouTube channel. That was another tip from the space guys. It was just basically use your existing channels. Don't feel you have to reinvent the wheel. If you've got a YouTube channel with loads of followers, put your content there. Don't feel you have to necessarily reinvent it. You can add Vimeo as well or whatever. Anyway, so that's that. And I think I must be near the end of this. Yeah, so this is like back in the building. I thought I'd show the team up calendar just to show us wrestling with space again. And like, so of course now we're back in a situation where we're all thinking, how do we use this new building that we've moved into? And yeah, we've got all of our new physical spaces, the archive, the bookshop, the cafe, the library where I am now, Lower Gallery Studio, yeah, which used to be the offices, is now a wee, well, not that wee actually, a decent sized education room / event space / exhibition space, and then the galleries and warehouse. So yeah, inevitably, we are, like a lot of organizations now, thinking about how we work in physical spaces again. And like everyone else, we're probably talking a lot about hybrid, which maybe we'll talk more about in Q&A and stuff. But yesterday I was in this room with colleagues trying to work out how we do our forthcoming event. The next one we're doing is talking with the architect of the building, which I wonder if that'll be a bit like the book launch in terms of a physical thing being talked about online. But yeah, talking to Neil Gillespie from Riachan Hall, we think we're going to sit them in the space, and we were trying to work out which leads and microphones we need where, so that we can be sitting behind the camera with the laptop and the Zoom webinar, but sort of trying to make it work both in the space and for audiences online. We haven't quite got to the stage of combining that with people physically in the space. I know the book festival, for example, are doing that really well at the moment, and we're hoping to learn from them. But that's maybe next exhibition for us. And then I just thought I'd show you some pictures of the new spaces. So yeah, there's the cafe. So some spaces are more or less recognizable from before, but we've built like a lovely new zinc top. There's a new light fittings that nod to the old neon, which is still here a bit further down, from Andrew Miller. He's made these rearrangeable light fittings, which are very beautiful and for sale. If anyone wants to buy one for fundraising, just £1,200 each, but very, very good value and desirable. And then we have there's what's in the upper gallery. We were excited to work with Carla Black for the opening exhibition. I know Ola's been in to see it already, and Carla was an artist that we worked with 11 years ago when we represented Scotland for the Venice Biennale, and we took Carla's work out there. A lot of it's very ephemeral. You can't see from the picture, but on the floor this is like pink powder, basically spread out all over the floor to give a kind of pink lush light to the room. But it's hard to transport Carla's work because it's often very ephemeral. She's interested in things that are on the point of either solidifying or falling apart, which you can imagine poses challenges. So we're glad to welcome her into the new building. She's great to work with in new spaces as well. She responds really well to them. And then this is now walking through, so behind that's actually Fiona in ghostly form. Behind her, that's the cafe, and she's coming down the ramp into the new warehouse space. So our approach with the architects was to strip back the new space to make it very different from the white cube gallery aesthetic on the other side. So we've got kind of twin light and dark spaces is how I'm experiencing them. At the moment, here's the warehouse. So many of you will have danced on this floor at one point or other, and hopefully will again. It's a gorgeous space. Before the ceiling would have been at the level of the girders, but that's all been opened up so we can have the full height of the space, but we've left these beautiful girders in, showing the history of the building as it was kind of added in stages from the, I think, late Victorian times. This beautiful kind of wooden struts behind, and you can see how Carla's working with the space. There's some gold leaf going up the pillar. You can just about see like dangling threads of copper that are catching the light coming down. We have these shutters that can be open and shut and set for different exhibitions depending on what light we're going for. And yeah, there's a side view. It's just a really exciting space basically to suddenly have to think about programming. So we're going to do sometimes where, as now, there's an exhibition across all the spaces, but other times the spaces will be working in different rhythms. So there might be, there will be next, Harry-Dina Pindell, great American minimalist older artist in the white spaces. And then here, we're going to have an installation from Jill Bradley that she's designing to make it kind of an event space as well as an art installation. So at that point, we're going to start to think about, because it's hard to program it for live events at the moment because there's such, fragile stuff on the floor, but soon we'll be thinking about how to bring more live things in. I'm having a lot of great conversations with partner organisations at the moment about how we might be useful within wider Edinburgh programming. But it's just, it's a fab gift of a space, really, and it's quite big as well. So there's that. And there's us from the outside. So that all used to be boarded up. Most recently when it was a nightclub, but now that's open again. We're quite long, as I'm discovering, when you're trying to go from the cafe back to the office carrying coffee and not spilling it. But but we're all getting used to the new routes around the building, and it still feels like the fruit market, which is a relief. It feels like a space that we know how to run and work. And I think partly that's been because we've gone through this gradual process. There was an incremental easing out, and then at the point where everyone was having to kind of suddenly close their buildings, we were already, I guess, primed to be thinking about that, which I think helped us. And now we're in the same boat as everyone else, trying to work out how to get it all back and how to keep the things that were good from before. But yeah, I think that's me. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions or if Leah wants to come in with anything.
That was brilliant. Thanks so much, Ian. I got a really strong sense of, different spaces as we've been cooped up in our own one space for the past 18 months. It's really nice to have an insight to people moving around different spaces and having to tackle different relationships with space. And the new gallery looks awesome. It has such a character of its own. I can't wait to visit it.
Yeah, great. Can't wait to see you when you come down.
Absolutely. That's really interesting to see that you were already at the cutting edge of hybrid events back in 2019 with your live Skype into a physical space. So you've talked about how you might be approaching hybrid events in the future. How is that going to work then? It's really interesting to hear that you've already got an artist who's thinking about making a physical space into an event as well as an art experience. Can you say a little bit more about how hybrid events might work for you?
Yeah, I think there's different approaches like that we're looking at, and I know different colleagues are kind of drawn to different things. I think like the one that's kind of in my head at the moment because we annually do an event with Book Week Scotland. And this year we wanted, we're working with Alice Tarbuck, who's a good Edinburgh-based writer and programmer, to put on an event that will have some live elements and some online elements, which I quite like the idea of. We're basically thinking of maybe doing something where there's some spaces that you can come into the space and maybe do some drawing, but also there'll be elements of that that'll be online for Zoom and create a kind of participatory space with different options depending on whether you're there, how you're accessing it. I'm also trying to think through the implications of that from an access point of view as well, to make sure that we're offering choice rather than like a better and worse experience.
Yeah.
As well, and I think probably the big shift that we're really keen to achieve is to make people who are accessing the events not physically feel as much able to participate and part of it as the people who are in the room, which might be limited because of number or because of geography. And we've always sort of like live streamed some of our events. Well, obviously not always, but for the last like 5 or 6 years. But it's been Louise, you saw in the picture when we were doing the space training at the back with a camera clamped onto a pillar sort of thing, and it's not been that feeling that we're monitoring the chat and feeding questions back in, or maybe even letting people's actual voices come through. And this is where I think we're working on a case-by-case basis. Our approach is to try and think, okay, what would be the ideal event? Start with that and then see if we can find a way to make it work technically, because it might be that for our exhibitions, the experts that we want to talk to are based in the States or South Africa or something, and it's just like, how you can make sure that they can be there as much as the audience can be there as well. So there are challenges, and we're basically at the moment, every time we sit and talk about it, there's another shopping list, heading to the internet to find like the bit of kit that will do it, and then trying to learn it incrementally as we go forward. But that's kind of what we've always done, I suppose. At some point we've learned how the PA system works, or how radio mics work, or how Periscope that we were using for streaming works. So I think that's kind of where we're at. We're trying to kind of think about what we want to do and how to keep the access, and then try and build it around that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, like you say, there's challenges, but also opportunities, because you do have access to experts from all around the world and people that you would ideally be able to have in the space, but maybe can't for whatever reason.
Yeah.
That's great. So we've got a couple of questions from the audience. Ian has asked that, having stripped out what was Buster Brown's, will you have any noise pollution problems from any music or sound events from your neighbours?
From our neighbours or to our neighbours?
From your neighbours, he's asked.
Yeah. No, I suppose I was probably more conscious of us like making sure that we dialogue with our neighbours about the events that we're doing. We've had quite a few like programmers and including music programmers in the space already, and I was always surprised actually at how ready people were to program sound into the existing spaces. When I started working at the gallery back in the 2010, we had quite a few experimental classical music programmers like Matthew Whiteside, who's a great like Northern Irish composer who works out of Glasgow, like who was up for programming into the space because he loved the space. And I was kind of saying, well, you can hear the trains like from downstairs. You might get an announcement about not leaving your bags unattended coming through. And actually it didn't really seem to matter. And we even had, Dunedin Ensemble did an event with Bach Solo Cello Suites, which is about the quietest thing you could program. And people seem to get it. So I think in terms of noise, both in and I think it's going to work actually, because it'll be a changing program. It wouldn't be like one thing repeatedly going on, and we'll just our artists tend to embrace the situation that they're coming into and work with it, I think.
Great, that's good to know. Okie doke. Ola has asked what live events can take place in the new warehouse. Are you envisaging performances like gigs, theatre, dance, as well as other creative genres? And are there any obvious limits to what you can do?
That's a good question, Ola. I think we want all of it, basically. I suppose and this is where like different programmers in the team are working in different ways. I've got a colleague called Sam Woods, and she's talking to more music-led organizations. It's fair to say, looking at sort of partnerships that might be, we might look at doing a week with a partner organization where there's a series of gigs or something. I kind of like programming in a more light touch way where you try and say yes to the things that come in. So I've already had some interesting approaches from both like club night promoters, cross art from promoters, and individual musicians and creative folk. And I think what we're going to enter now is a period of learning what the limits are in the space, and then do what we like to do, which is to try and map out the space by doing stuff and discover what we can do. But at the moment, we're in a phase of doing our best to bring as much in and learn as widely as possible.
That's great. So Michael's asking about Festival 2022. Good grief, right into the future. So he wants to know what you think the Fruit Market's role in that festival might be, and if anyone's already been in touch with Fruit Market about it.
Well, we're always part of the festival because like we're one of the main venues in the art festival. So that we're in the festival of 2021 at the moment with Carla Black. And I believe I think Fiona's got the artist programmed for 2022, and it's likely we'll be working like adventurously with the space again. We've done various things with the festival over the years, trying things like programming our own stream of live events in the cafe, which was interesting. It was quite hard to punch through like the noise of other things happening, but we're always a fringe venue. One of the more successful things that we did for the festival was last year. So I didn't mention it, but it was a huge part of our programming. As we were closing the physical building down was the Night Walk for Edinburgh, which we made with artists Janet Cardiff and George Perez Miller, which you can still do. It's live now, and you can download it to your phone at any night. And that was in the international festival program and sold out within a week, where you basically walk around in a sort of augmented reality walk through the Edinburgh's closes of the old town with music, and it was very cross art form in terms of we were working with ballet dancers and percussionists and magicians, pop singer. It was so that again, that was another like hugely important digital space to try. So I suppose we'll just keep seeing what the opportunities are and listening to what people come to us with. We've done a fringe theatre in the past where the exhibition has allowed it. That could happen again. It's kind of like my previous answer. It's let's play.
Yeah, possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
Jim wanted to know what seemed easy but actually turned out to be really difficult as part of your relocation project.
That's such a good question. I suspect probably my colleagues that were more directly managing the architectural side of it would give you answers that just wouldn't be occurring to me. I think what's challenging for us at the moment is probably what's challenging for everyone, which is managing energy levels and comfort levels as we try to kind of hold the team together at points where some people are like we all know the pandemic exacerbated like differences and inequalities in people's experience. So for some people, coming back into the office is feels like the right thing to do at the moment, but other people aren't there yet. And it's when everyone's either at home or in the building, it's very obvious how you kind of communicate. But it's just trying to make sure I think that everyone's in the loop and we're all working together well, which I think we're doing, but it just requires a bit more communication.
Yeah.
So it's not been so much a physical challenge. It's more been like a team and space challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm seeing that in my own work as well. It's I think that'll touch a lot of people as well. I wanted to know what the outcome of the Writers' Shift Commission is going to be. So was that working throughout the pandemic then, as well as during the relocation?
It was, and thanks for asking about that. So what I think is going to happen is that we're going to publish. The Fruit Market's got its own publishing imprint. Mainly, we've been doing monographs about artists for each exhibition, but we have started to do some more light touch and more literature publishing. I was delighted, for example, this year that 2 poems from a pamphlet we did around the Emma Hart exhibition called Women on the Road were chosen for the best Scottish poems of 2019, 20, I can't remember which one has just come out, by the Scottish Poetry Library. So I think we're going to do a book. What's challenging me about that at the moment is that the project grew so many arms and legs, like it's hard to work out how you kind of publish it, because we were also working with the staff and encouraging them to think about writing from their experience of the gallery. So I have writing by staff, there's visual art made by staff in response to the writing that the lead poets were doing as well. But there's like one outcome that's just about to happen is in the next issue of Gutter, which is Scotland's new writing magazine. There's a long-ish interview with the poets involved. So I would go there as this kind of first point of view. And we did publish, and I'll maybe put it in the chat in a minute, a little pamphlet with little digital excerpts from each poet at some point in the middle of it all as well. So yeah, there's more to come, and we'll do like launch events and stuff around that. That's
great. Yeah, it's almost like when you're approaching scheduling art exhibitions in your space, you're talking about this project having grown arms and legs, so maybe trying to fit it just into a book just isn't going to work. Maybe more ways of interpreting the outcome.
Yeah, and I suppose in a way I should think, well, it must have been a success then because it was meant to be generative. And it has done that. I mean, one of the really exciting things, I know we're out of time, so I won't go into it, but one of the really exciting things that happened was that Jane discovered that who we thought the first woman in the programme wasn't actually the first woman in the programme, because there was a thing in the early 1970s with an artist called Bruce Lacey that was billed as a solo show, but it turned out he was working collaboratively with his wife, Jill Smith, and she'd sort of been like happens to marginalised people, pushed out the story. And she's still alive and up in the Hebrides and working. So we've made contact with her. We're hoping to invite her back into the physical space to do some kind of event as well. She's a great person. So it won't all fit into a book, but I probably do owe it to the poets to get some of it published well.
Definitely. Good stuff. Well, that is all we've got time for this morning. But I want to say a massive thank you to Ian for sharing your time and your energy with us this morning. That was all really exciting. Thank you for that link.
Welcome.
I wanted to wish you and the Fruit Market team all the very best in the future. I can't wait to see what comes next for you guys.
Thank you, and thanks so much to everyone for their thoughts as well. It's really great to be talking to like wider like networks of people about what we're doing at the building. And just to reiterate, we are like very interested in what everyone would like us to be at the moment. So feel free to drop us a line let's have conversations.
Sounds good. Well, lovely. Thanks very much, Ian. It's time for me to hand back to Caitlin now.